Mansell, if you hear me, I have no sound. Hey, Mansell, can you hear me? This is Brad. I don't have any sound.
Like this. Yeah. Okay. Are we good to go? Okay. Okay. He said everybody speak into the microphone in order for us to hear. Okay. Yes. Brad, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I can't switch on my camera though for some reason, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Brad.
All right, then we'll do with audio.
Brad, can you keep talking for us?
Yes, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Perfect.
Stop now, Brad.
Perfect.
I had no sound for a while, but now it seems to be okay, at least that part.
Okay, sounds good, Brad. Are you all ready? Hi, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning of this, but thank you all for being patient with us and for attending our session. We're super excited to be here and to talk a little bit about after fire. And so I'm going to go ahead and just do a little bit of an introduction here, but we'll keep it pretty short. So almost a year ago now, I would say, Nina approached us asking whether or not 2 years. Wow, Nina approached us asking about whether or not EPA had any resources about what tribes can do when returning home after a fire where there may have been fire and smoke damage. And we at EPA really didn't have a lot. We have a lot of resources for before a fire and when, during fires, but something like this we really didn't have. And so we all worked together. We pulled in ITEP, some folks across EPA, and Brad, who is with Safeguard EnvrioGroup as well, to kind of figure out a way to make something that would be responsive to Nina's original request that we could also share, beyond her, but to a larger audience, and that could hopefully be repurposed. And so last May, we held an After a Fire online training, which some of you may or may not have attended. And so this is our very high-level synopsis of that training with a plug for a little bit more afterwards. Yeah. And so once again, this is just going to be a high-level overview. We're going to have presentations from ITEP, Safeguard, and Stewart's Point here with Mansell, Brad, and Nina. And then we're going to move into a discussion. So we have some discussion questions based off of our online training, just some commonly asked questions, and we're going to talk a little bit more about our certification pathway at that point. And then we'll end the session with some Q&A from the audience and from our online folks. So here's a little bit of our overview, not too interesting there, just kind of what I said. And then here are our speakers. And so I'll quickly introduce everybody, and then they will take it off from there. And so first up, we have Mansell. So for the past 22 years, Mansell Nelson has served as the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals at Northern Arizona University. He is the project director for the Environmental Education Outreach Program and for the Indoor Air Quality in Tribal Communities. And I'm sure you all know and love Mansell. Brad, who's going to be our second speaker, is a published author, researcher, technical consultant, and high-demand speaker on indoor environmental issues. He is the founder, president, and CEO of Safeguard EnvrioGroup, a leading indoor environmental consulting firm with corporate headquarters in Southern California, and IAQPrepCourse.com that provides fire and smoke damage training worldwide. Then we have Nina. Nina is a graduate of Cal Poly Humboldt State as the Director of Environmental Planning and Natural Resources for Kashia. The overall goal is building tribal capacity. Then we have Alalee Bonos Keener. Alalee is going to join us for our facilitated discussion, but will not be presenting today. Alalee works with EPA Region 9 as the Indoor Environments and Asthma Coordinator. She joined EPA as a Community Engagement Coordinator in the Superfund Division, working with communities affected by hazardous waste sites. Then she was the Environmental Health and Community Coordinator for the U.S.-Mexico Border Program and the Project Officer in the Tribal Branch administering grants. Really quickly, lastly, I'm just the moderator here. I work in EPA's Region 9 office, and I focus on wildfire smoke issues related to public health. I'm also the staff lead for Region 9's smoke team, and I'm involved with a lot of interagency work groups on education, outreach, and communication efforts around wildfire smoke. And with that, I will stop talking, and I will hand it over to Mansell for our first part, which is wildfires and indoor environments.
Thank you, Kelly. And I want to especially thank Nina because she's the one that sparked the catalyst. If you're a chemist, you know what that means, to make things happen. Next slide. There I am. I have to stand. Sorry, can't sit while I'm talking. But next slide. So I'm going to cover these things. Like Kelly said, this is a high-level overview. This was about a 6-hour webinar all combined, several webinar series. So obviously we're not going to cover all that, but it's been captured and it's available on the ITEP Scholar Learning Management System. Next slide, please. So of course, most of you probably are aware of the problems with wildfire smoke health-wise. That's probably why you're here. You're concerned about that. And we have lots of reasons to be concerned. And we also need to be concerned about how it affects our indoor environment. And it's not only during the wildfire, but it's post-wildfire that health issues continue. Next slide, please. So most of you are probably aware of the health effects, but this is important to recognize. Even though a wildfire might be for relatively short term throughout the year, there are health effects, both short term and long term. Next slide, please. And there's impacts to the building. So Ali was talking to me this morning. She says, could we call this third-hand smoke? And yeah, it's similar to a third-hand smoke that's been assaulted by tobacco smoke. Same idea, but of course, wildfires have lots of other potential chemicals that may be in it, and those are saturating everything in the building. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we emphasized during our webinar is how do you get the information? EPA has the Air Now website, which we highly recommend for you to become familiar with and to use as a resource so that you understand what the impacts are. There's also a lot of educational materials there. Next slide, please. So the Air Quality Index is one of our ways of communicating about the impacts of wildfire. So, of course, green is supposed to be good. I'm one of those vulnerable populations, so as we get closer to yellow, I'm already compromised. And so it's a very individual thing, but as you go into the different colors, by the time you get to purple, everybody's suffering. And so this is a way of looking at what's happening outside, but how do we look at inside? Next slide, please. So how does the smoke get in? I was at a session yesterday and somebody said that my HEPA filter is not working well enough. Well, this is why. The smoke gets into your house every which way. I live in an area that's threatened by wildfire smoke. I'm in the middle of the largest ponderosa forest, I think in the world, or at least second. And so one of the things I did in my house is I weatherized it to keep smoke out. Of course, for me, just people burning their wood stoves during the winters enough to cause me problems. But during the wildfire events we had in Flagstaff this year, I hunkered down, closed my doors, turned on my HEPA filter, and if you know anything about the numbers, I kept my home down to less than 2 micrograms per cubic meter during a wildfire event. So weatherization is key, along with HEPA filtration. Next slide, please. There's a lot of different ways that we can monitor locally what's going on, both inside and outside. And I think that's one of the key things, messages I would share with you is we keep talking about going inside. That's not sufficient because the smoke follows us there. In a typical situation, it'll be reduced, but being inside is not necessarily the solution. We got to work on a lot of other issues. Next slide, please. And one of the things, of course, is to communicate with our community so they understand the risks. Some people think wood smoke smells good. When I smell it, it's a threat to my life. So we need to communicate the risk in a way that is appropriate. We don't want people to panic, but we do want people to take appropriate action. And that's a tough way to get people to not panic, but take action. Can be pretty tough sometimes. But I'm an environmental educator, and risk communication is what I do. I do it with kids, I do it with adults, and there's a lot of useful training on EPA's materials as well as others. If any of your educators know about Project Learning Tree, they have a great risk communication curriculum that you can help you out. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've done at ITEP is we have online on-demand training, and the webinars that we're talking about today are after wildfire training. It's available online now. It's not done, but we wanted to say it was available for you today. I still need to go in and put in some activities and reading assignments to make it into a full course. But right now, all the recordings from the webinars are there, and they're chopped into sections, so you don't have to watch them all at the same time. And there's a list of what we address in there. And then we do have another course that's online as well. That's basically the ambient air preparation for wildfire. So you're welcome to that. And what I didn't put on the slide is we also have a live course for wildfire smoke that we anticipate offering in the future. I don't think it's currently on our website, but we can offer it when we get people asking for it. So if you want the live training, ask for it. Send me emails. Next slide, please. And there's my contact information. Email is probably the best way to get a hold of me. I still have a minute. All right, so, encourage you to get more informed and find the tools here. At ITEP, we didn't have the total solution either, like Kelly was talking about, so that's why we brought in Brad to help us out. He's a professional and has worked in this arena and was able to help us with the post-wildfire activities indoor air. So I can handle it up to that point, so if you have questions about indoor air generally, I'm happy to work with you. We do have live courses. I taught one last week about indoor air. And I'm very passionate about indoor air, so I'm happy to talk to anybody that we can help. So I think it's Brad's turn. Brad is online somewhere.
Yeah.
There he is.
Thank you so much, man. So I'll take your extra minute. I'll probably need that. I want to thank you and Kelly and all the colleagues I have out there. I wish I could be there today in person with you all, but unfortunately my current schedule just doesn't permit it. So as a wildfire consultant, we use wildfire statistics to help us illustrate past wildfire activity. However, statistics can also provide the ability to forecast the number and locations of large wildfire events. And I'll tell you, the statistical data out there is quite alarming, especially considering that studies show 1 in 5 single-family homes in the U.S. is at risk of being in a wildfire over the next 3 years. That's really crazy. So just based on statistical data alone, taking the necessary steps to make our communities more resilient to the impacts of wildfire really makes a whole lot of sense. So, it goes without saying, increasing your home's chances of surviving a wildfire greatly improves by using fire retardant building materials, such as roofs, and preparing defensible spaces. We talked a lot about this in the ITEP courses. This would be especially advised if your property is in the wildland-urban interface. Now, in the event of a wildfire, if the property was within a close proximity to the burn zone, the area may have been evacuated for a short or perhaps a long period of time without any access to your home or personal property. So, time permitting, I hope to cover just a few important tips on pre-entry safety considerations and cleaning up the mess after a wildfire event. Can we go to slide 1 now? All right. So first and foremost, never return to a damaged home before the area is declared safe by fire authorities, as well as local building and safety officials. I've personally been through a wildfire evacuation, several of them, in fact. So I can tell you personally, returning home can be both physically and mentally challenging. So you're going to have to use extreme caution. And here's just a few tips to consider. Prior to entering any structure located within or adjacent to the fire perimeter, the exterior should be inspected for structural fire damage. Fire damaged structural members may compromise the structure, integrity of roofs, floors, walls, foundations. If you have any doubts about the safety or the structure integrity of the building, have it inspected by a qualified building inspector or a structural engineer or tribal authority before you enter. If doing this preliminary inspection is on your own, walk carefully around the outside of your property from a safe distance, of course. Check for loose power lines, charred trees, or power poles that have been charred. Smell for gas leaks, any structural damage, and ash pits. And by the way, ash pits are those holes that are created by burned trees that's filled with hot ash. Be careful of those. And also be aware during evacuation that wild animals may have taken shelter in your home. They're also fearful of wildfire. They may be in your garage or other outbuildings. So be on the alert for that. And also because flash floods and mudslides are a common and deadly hazard after a wildfire, be sure to have an evacuation plan and monitor weather reports for flood warnings. Stay away from burned forests, storm channels, or other natural drainages like creeks and rivers. Let's go ahead and advance the slide if you can. Of course, in the aftermath of a wildfire, homes could be left with an extreme range of impact severity, from no impact at all to severe thermal and smoke damage. Somewhere in between is the light impact related to settled, lightly adhered particles of char and ash, which seems to be the majority of the insurance claims my company investigates. Even in a household that's untouched by the fire, still in close proximity to the fire zone, it's likely that it suffered at least some residual damage from smoke, including settled particles, possible corrosive chemicals, blowing embers, heat if the blaze got close enough. In situations with very light impact, and I mean primarily from settled particles, homeowners can do some light cleaning themselves, but it's always a good idea to talk to a remediation company first to get some advice. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. I think it's important that we all understand there is no single approach to basic cleaning that fits all wildfire impact situations. While most basic cleaning can be done by the homeowner, the likelihood of recontamination is always a concern. So as far as returning home while smoky conditions still remain outside, most experts say it's best to stay indoors, close all windows and exterior doors, and be sure to put the HVAC system on 100% recycle mode. This will do a lot to lessen the likelihood of recontamination. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. Sorry, I'm talking fast, but we're restricted to 7 or 8 minutes. The goal of wildfire residue cleanup is to return the property to a pre-fire condition. There's no specific formula, as I said earlier, for success. However, by following a logical stepwise approach, most fire-related damages can be corrected and odors managed. So the purpose of basic cleaning is to remove wildfire particles from surfaces, also to reduce or eliminate odors and to reduce the spread of residue within the structure. The best way to remove an odor is to remove its source. Unless removed or otherwise neutralized, wildfire residue will continue to emit chemical vapors, causing odors that may linger for extended periods. That source could be anything that can absorb odors. That includes carpet, upholstered furniture, comforter, pillow, mattress, even your clothes, which can be professionally cleaned to remove odor and particulates. Complete removal, you should know, all wildfire particles is not scientifically feasible. However, if you do use a systematic method of cleaning, the vast majority of wildfire particles can be removed, thereby just significantly reducing the potential for lingering wildfire residues or odors. So if the scenario is that the homeowner will be managing some basic cleanup themselves, it would be a good idea to wear proper personal protection. And that would include, at minimum, gloves, goggles, long sleeve shirt, shoes, all these things you see depicted in the photograph. And importantly, keep small children and pets and anyone who has asthma, allergies or other breathing problems out of the house until it's clean. Are you listening to me, Mansell?
Yes.
Right. So go ahead and advance the slide. I'll try to get through this. So, if you're properly protected and equipped, do-it-yourselfers may be able to clean much of the light impact associated with most wildfire claims. But again, do it with caution, based on severity, personal limitations, and of course, health of the homeowner, as well as your insurance coverage. It might be a good idea to get a professional restoration company that has this type of specialized experience in wildfire cleanup involved. Depending upon the surface, general cleaning of loosely adhered particles, and I'm saying loosely adhered particles, you can use a dry sponge wiping technique. That might be just sufficient. Dry sponge cleaning will remove most loose wildfire particles from smooth, non-porous materials such as metals, plastic, finished woods, painted surfaces. After its use, it's best to test these areas for cleanliness. All you need to do is wipe again with a dry white cloth or paper towel. And just know that it might be required that multiple cleanings might need to be done until the surface passes the wipe test. Don't use the sponge on wet cleaning. That's a no-no. All that's going to do, on wet soot or on wet debris, because all that's going to do is just smear it, make it very difficult to clean. Next, you might want to vacuum with a HEPA filter device, which, for those that don't know, it stands for high efficiency particulate air. That's really the gold standard in capturing extremely small particles. HEPA vacuuming is the most effective means to remove the loose wildfire particles from hard, non-porous surfaces and the surfaces of porous materials such as upholstered furniture and even carpeting. All surfaces should be vacuumed, HEPA vacuumed 2 or 3 times and in different directions, back and forth and side to side. Be careful with some fabrics, though, such as silk or other specialized textures. It can be damaged by vacuuming, so be careful. Indoor wet cleaning, also referred to as damp wiping, should be limited to hard, non-porous or semi-porous surfaces. And that would include sealed wood, painted walls, ceilings, countertops, sealed flooring. For light particle contamination, cleaning using a general purpose household cleaner may just be sufficient. If a general purpose cleaner is not sufficient, you might progress to a more aggressive cleaner such as citrus cleaners. And this stuff is always available at your local store. Where chemical products are being utilized, though, property owners or professional cleaning and restoration services should carefully follow the cleaning product manufacturer's recommendations. And I could not make that more stringent. Follow the product manufacturer's recommendations. And when cleaning porous items such as carpet and upholstery, most of the particles can initially be removed using a HEPA vacuum, followed by wet fabric cleaning and wet extraction. And as I mentioned to you earlier, cleaning of wildfire-impacted areas and items should be conducted in a systematic manner just to prevent the cross-contamination. For example, ceiling to floor and room by room. Ideally, cleaned items and rooms are separated from contamination areas by closing doors or plastic sheeting. that's the approach that you want to take, because the wind-driven and tracked-in wildfire particles may be present for weeks to months following a wildfire. You may need to repeat the cleaning for buildings located within or immediately adjacent to the burned area. Okay, let's advance the slide. Thank you. And do-it-yourselfers may decide to do their own laundry, which may require the need to wash every stitch of clothing in the house, even if it was in a closed closet or a dresser drawer. As smoke can still permeate these spaces through small cracks, crevices, and they'll deposit odorous particles. Some insurance companies or policies will reimburse a homeowner for doing it yourself time and cost of supplies for post-fire cleanup. So keep those receipts. Do-it-yourselfers need to take precautions and need to be aware that some common cleaning practices, such as regular dry cleaning, can actually set a smoky smell in clothes and other fabrics instead of removing it. So be careful when you're doing this yourself. And also, smoke can penetrate wood furniture, and cleaning up with water can warp it. So do-it-yourselfers should carefully read, again, the manufacturer's directions before attempting any expensive cleaning of draperies or upholstered furniture. And it may be worth it to leave that to the pros, rather than to risk ruining your beloved pieces by using the wrong cleaning supplies. I think having a good understanding of cleaning after a wildfire can greatly improve your chances of not introducing secondary damages to surfaces or even to your sacred ceremonial personal items. Let's go ahead and advance the slide. Enough on that one. So remember, if the building was within the burn area, professional wildfire restoration will likely be required to restore materials damaged by wildfire energy, and also to remove particle accumulations, clean smoke impacted materials, and treat surfaces to reduce the potential for lingering odors. An initial assessment by the property owner can help determine the need for professional restoration services. And as a general rule, when structure damage exists, or if basic cleaning is not sufficient to eliminate fire damages or even odors, I think it's a good idea that a professional fire and wildfire residue restoration firm should be consulted. And I would strongly suggest that if you don't feel you are well enough or enough informed to do it yourself. So that's the end of this presentation. Thank you so much. And I think I'm going to now, I think Nina is next. So Nina, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay. I need to be able to see. I can't see outside the back of my head unless my kids are doing something wrong. So, right? All you parents know that, there's just like the sixth sense. So I was asked to provide a little bit like reason why I asked for this training. And I was listening to Mansell and listening to Brad, like just a reminder, like ITEP and what Mansell does, they have a lot of good technical assistance and trainings with indoor air and with what they do. And my initial conversation with EPA was, so what about tribes? Like, so what Brad was just talking about, I'm like, that's capacity building. Don't you want to do that for your own community instead of hiring a contractor to come in and do it? And if they take them forever to do it. So my thing with this is 6 years ago is when I first made this request. This is the first time I made this request, and it was after one of the fires in Lake County in California, and we had asked EPA to come and talk about this. And the person at the time, and I can't remember her name, but she's like, "Oh, well, I go out and I do that, and we could train people." Ding, ding, ding. I'm like, you could train people, you could train tribes to assess their own tribal homes and to provide that service to their community. If you were in my last presentation, I'm all about capacity building. Like, how can the tribe build their capacity? You guys didn't fix my picture. I thought you'd make it as big as a square. All right, well, burned out. Like, this is what we're seeing a lot in some of our communities. Like, wildfire comes through, especially in our forested communities. And what's left behind is you have stuff like this. Next slide. So what do you have in place? I was like, do you have enough staff? How many has every staff that they need? Yeah, I better not see any hands or I'm going to want to work for you. Some tribes have emergency response department, but not everybody does. And does your environmental staff oversee your emergency response events? Do you have a pre-disaster mitigation plan in place? Because even if having a plan, a draft plan in place can help you with FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. So there are services. And even if you have one that's 3 to 5 years old, you should start updating it. This is old news. You guys all know this. But I started thinking, like, what do you have in place? So do you have an agreement with other tribes for hazardous response teams? And just so you know, when I was thinking about this presentation, is Rob in here? He's not here. I contacted Rob Roy. For anybody who doesn't remember, there was a fire that went through that burned 82% of the reservation. And I worked down in Southern California at the time. And I said, you know, Rob, what did you guys do? Like, what did you have in place? What helped you? And this is based on this is some of the conversation from him. But I realized a lot of tribes don't have some of these things in place. And the reason why I talk about hazardous response teams is that one of the things that they identified, and is John Flores in here? No, because he worked at La Jolla. So they had, when some of the houses burned, they had hazardous material that they didn't know what to do with. And one of the questions was they reached out to other tribes to see if their fire departments had hazardous response teams, because the local fire department assisting them did not. Sheriff did not. CHP did not. And have you developed a relationship with your local response team? And he was like, this is really critical. So tribal communities, if you guys been surrounded by wildfires, you know your community like gets cut off. Kashaya gets cut off every time there's a fire. And then we have to have a conversation with the county and get access to the reservation. Because when you have a fire burning, where is your community going to go? They're going to go home. If they don't live on the res, they're going to go home. Well, how do they get there? And if they get there, how do you service them? So we had issues where we could not get to them to service them. And then do you have certified or trained staff? And this is where I really love the training that EPA put together with Brad and his company with Mansell, because I wanted it, I felt that the tribes deserve to have an avenue to become trained and certified if they wish. Maybe your housing department or your housing authority is somebody who does this. Maybe it's your emergency response department or staff that does this, instead of having to rely on an outside contractor who you're not sure is going to give you true answers. And I say that in a caveat that anybody could not give you a true answer, I guess. But if you have that hole, like gap, we already checked with EPA, and your general assistance program can cover this training. Next slide. So who will come to your rescue? Dedicated staff and departments and tribal members. So when the fire went through La Jolla, their water operators were, when the fire first hit, it was only tribal staff that was out there trying to put out fires. And those gentlemen lost their homes during that time, but they still maintained the water system and kept it up to try and fight that fire until local response came. And that was more than a day before they showed up. And then other tribal communities, like I remember there was a huge help from Pechanga. There was help from Viejas. People put people up in hotels. They didn't ask questions. So having a good relationship, well, even if you're fighting, we all know in an emergency, everybody pulls together. Even in your own community, you might be mad at your family member who lives next door to you and won't talk to them. But when it's an emergency, everybody bands together. He talked about, like Red Cross and other groups, like they came in, provided that food. It would really help. It took pressure off of people. The assistance teams that came in from EPA, and he really applauded EPA. He's like, EPA just came in, worked with them, said, let's revamp your work plans because this is priority. You need to get this done. And then the local departments, law enforcement, so they also provided a lot of that technical assistance and security. So do I have another slide? Is that my last slide? Oh, okay, good. I try to keep it short. I was told. Somebody told me I had to keep it short. But what I wanted to push is that if the tribe wants to be able to do this for yourself, you should. So in 2017, in the Santa Rosa area, we had a fire that came through. It was really strange to have a fire come right down into the town and burn out a whole side of the town. And it made me realize that some people in those areas where it burned, it was a burn path. It was shown in 1964 that still is a burn path, the number of homes that were there. But the length of time it took some people to get their homes rebuilt or to get it cleared, and how many shady contractors are out there. And that happens with us in our tribal communities. We do have people that come in that they're just pulling one on you. And I don't think that we deserve better than that. And so I really pushed to have some form of accreditation and certification available to the tribes if they wish to pursue it. The first training they had, the live training, was over 60 participants. A lot of housing authorities, fire departments, environmental staff, a lot of the tribes I think were on there. And so that's my pitch, is like, if you want to build that capacity in your community and have that available, I really hope that you will participate in this training, the live streams or the modules that they have put together to help that be a path for you guys. So I'm all about empowering ourselves, because you can do it. And you guys know nothing and even if the case where Brad going over, do it yourself, even if you train your community, if you have a group and maybe they're part of your CERT team or your TERT team, actually, Tribal Environmental Response Team, that they're the ones who help go out and assess the homes or assess the areas or give report backs to people about what's going on with the property. At least you know that they have the right information. They know what to do in case of hazardous materials, that they have that knowledge to be safe as you can possibly be in your community. Because wildfires aren't going away. I keep waiting to hear that dry winds, waiting to hear when the next fire is going to be in our area. So we all have to be prepared. And I'm happy that it finally came around this time, because like I said, the last 4 years, the number of fires we've had have been really devastating. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Nina. So we were going to move into kind of a facilitated discussion question. It sounds like we have one question right now.
She's jogging.
Thank you. My question is pretty quick. Nina, do you know if the training is available to other than environmental staff? You seem to say that it was.
Yes.
But
so it is. Yes, it is. And that anybody, if the tribe designated, they wanted them to be able to do this. So it could, like I said, be your housing departments or authorities, could be your environmental staff or your emergency response staff or people you have on your tribal or emergency response teams. It's whomever wants to do it. If they wish to go through the environmental department, because the training at this point, I don't know if that will always happen, but right now, general assistance program funds can cover the training. And then if you wish to go to get the accreditation, if I'm not mistaken, that can be covered to that. I think that's 300, or I don't talk about that. Oh, she will give you specific information in case I'm wrong, so I will leave that. But there is a cost to getting that certification, and I believe there's some help in a temporary format to cover that as well.
Yeah, so if I may really quickly, we're going to use a few minutes now to talk about what that pathway is. And so we mentioned the online after fire training that we held in May. That is online in an on-demand available format through ITEP, but there are two additional steps to getting accredited that we worked with ITEP and Safeguard EnvrioGroup to try to provide for free, because there's typically a lot of costs involved. And so if it's okay with everybody, we're going to go over a little bit more about that pathway. We also have some resources that are at the back of the room that you can grab at the end of the presentation. But at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Brad, and he's going to specifically talk about what the accreditation does, the costs involved, and all of that information. And so, Brad, if you are with us, I'll hand it off to you, and I'll go through the slides.
Yes, can I be heard? I think I was muted.
You are loud and clear, Brad.
All right, thank you. Well, in brief, ITEP, through funding from the EPA, has made available a special opportunity for those of you interested in pursuing a higher level of wildfire education and training, as well as a path to fire and smoke damage certification. So the prep course is called IAQprepcourses.com. Which can be reached through www.iaqprepcourses.com. Okay, I see it on your screen now. And what it is, it's really a global online platform that offers a full spectrum of fire and smoke damage training, where students learn online at their own pace and convenience. The platform is really state of the art. Students can start, pause, and restart wherever they left off at any time. You can even come back months later to finish the course if you choose, though most people finish in just a few hours. And those that take this high-level training through IAQ prep course does exceedingly well on the certification exam, which is administered by the ACAC. And so you know, and I'll do it as briefly as I can, I was asked by ACAC to develop the certification track, which includes 3 smoke and fire damage consulting certifications. So I was the developer of that, and then I was asked to put together a prep course. So you can understand that this prep course gives you a unique advantage to the actual certification, as I also wrote the certification exam. So at any rate, but just to make it, just to do it brief, you can advance the slide. Thank you. There are actually 3 tracks in the certification program. The first being the Council Certified Fire and Smoke Damage Consultant, which requires at least 8 years of experience in not wildfire, but fire and smoke in the field. The next is the Council Certified Fire and Smoke Damage Technician. It requires only 2 years of experience. And then there's the vocational certification, the Council Certified Fire and Smoke Damage Assistant Technician, which doesn't require any experience, just current involvement in the fire and smoke damage field. The first 2, the CFSC and the CFST, are the only accredited fire and smoke damage certification in the industry. They're accredited by the Council of Engineering and Scientific Specialty Boards. The acronym is CESB, which is the recognized body for engineering and scientific certification programs. Do you want me to go over some of the stuff that's in the prep course?
I'd say let's keep it pretty quick at this part because we want to have time for Q&A.
All right, then why don't you go ahead and advance the slide if you can. The prep course provides in-depth discussion on the domains of knowledge which are addressed by the ACAC certification exam. And the 3 types of fires in which it addresses is structure fires, wildfires, and protein or kitchen fires. It goes over such topics as fire behavior, combustion byproducts, and residues. You can read that all on there, so you don't need to hear that from me, and I'm not going to waste any of your time. So why don't we just advance if you can? Advance the slide. Thank you. And basically, if you go through the prep course, you'll be able to describe the major fire byproducts, which includes particles, residues, and constituents. You can also read the rest of the slide and see that for yourself. So it's highly recommended that you go through the prep course first. And thank you, ITEP and the EPA, for making this available to you at no cost. It's important, though, when you do get on the IAQ prep courses that when you register for the course, you use this coupon code, and it is EPA Tribal. So you might want to write that down. That's all in caps, and that will give you complimentary entry. You can register and you can go ahead and take that course. And again, that's all complimentary due to the EPA grants and ITEP for making that happen. So that's basically it. If we have time, we can talk a little bit about the ACAC and who they are. And I'll just say briefly, they're one of the oldest, most respected indoor environmental certification bodies actually in the industry. So you can just read the slide and see that for yourself. But they administer the certification test independently from the prep course. That's the way it works. And you can get more information by contacting them with the information below. Thank you, Kelly.
Great. Thank you so much, Brad. So to quickly summarize, we have the After Fire Training course available on ITEP's website, and that is for free. And then we recommend folks to take the IAQ Fire and Smoke Damage Prep course, which is also offered for free using that code. And then at that point, the ACAC Fire and Smoke Damage Consulting exam allows people to go and actually get accredited. And so we developed these little cards that have all of those resources on them. So you'll have the link to the online training, the link to the prep course with the code, and then also more information about the ACAC accreditation process. And we've left those cards on the ends of each table. So if you want to grab them, they're just little business cards. They should have all the information you need. We'd recommend you grab one on the way out there. The ACAC fire and smoke damage consulting exam does have a cost incurred with it. For those of you with existing GAP grants, the exam cost can be covered by the GAP program. And so if you have more questions about that, Ali can explain that process a little bit more. But I think for now, in the interest of time, we'll move to Q&A. And if anybody is curious about how to get the cost of the exam covered by the GAP grant, we have our expert up here with us. Of course.
So just for those of you who have GAP grants, want to encourage you to talk to your project officer and make sure that you have a plan in place, and make sure that they approve it. Obviously, your project officer would have to approve the cost, and you probably have to have like a plan and a component, saying this is the training that I want, and this is how it's going to benefit, how it matches, the needs of the tribe and your ITEP and everything. So I just wanted to make that quick clarification. So you can always reach out to me, ask me any questions, but also reach out to your project officer.
And my boss is going to upset if I don't tell you this. So the funding from ITEP is a limited time, limited number offer. So if you're interested, do it now, like this evening or sometime in the next few weeks, so that we can wrap up our portion of it, and emphasize it's just the training part that is being paid for. The certification is you have to go through your GAP or your tribe or whatever to pay for the tests that you have to take. So we're just covering the training, and it's a limited time offer. So in other words, if you wait a year, it won't be there. If you wait 6 months, it might not be there. And if you wait 3 months, hopefully it's there, but don't wait too long. And of course, even then, you can probably find other funds to help you out.
Thank you for that information. So I think with that, we'll start with Q&A if anybody has questions.
Hi, Christian Aceves from Saboba. I had a question about indoor air quality equipment, like loaner equipment or any resources like that. We're looking to conduct environmental assessments for indoor air quality. I was curious to know if there's any resources that ITEP can provide, or TAMS or something like that.
TAMS does have some limited resources, emphasis on the limited. With low-cost sensors now, you can put together your own kit. I have a display on just outside of this room for about $300. You can use some low-cost sensors that'll give you a lot of useful information. So I really recommend you look at that. But TAMS does have some supplies and a limited, so you might want to call them this afternoon if you're ready to go to work. And I can help you make that connection. So, but the low-cost sensors are inexpensive enough that you can put those into your GAP plan, cooperation with your project officer, and just get your own set of instruments to do this kind of work. So you might want to consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Is that equipment listed somewhere, like on the TAMS website?
You're gonna have to talk to me. Sorry.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
The TAMS equipment, there should be on the website. This other sensor technology is pretty new stuff. I got mine last week and I was invoice 002. So in other words, it's emerging, but I'm happy to work with folks to do that. There is one other thing to remind you of. Using EPA funds, you may need a co-op. So that's probably going to be the hardest part, actually. We do have staff on ITEP to help with that, but you should also reach out to your regional, make sure your project officer is involved. The region's, of course, going to be the one to approve it ultimately, But we do have folks to help out with that. In fact, Josie's here at the conference. I don't see her in the room, but we got to keep her busy. So feel free to talk to her and Melinda about helping with a QAP. So. Any other questions? And by the way, I love your questions, so thank you for asking.
Just a little bit more on the quality assurance plan, the QAP. There is a streamlined QAP that is a lot easier. We worked with our insurance office at EPA. So don't be afraid to fill one out. I mean, I hear that they're super complicated, but this one is not as complicated. And we've kind of had conversations before. You should definitely contact your project officer if you're going to purchase it with EPA funds, and the quality assurance folks too at EPA, just to see, you know, what they can tell you. I was just talking to Nina and we were thinking, is it really needed if you're just gathering like information? The best thing to do is just talk to the quality assurance people and see, like, do I really need to do a QAP if I'm just doing, you know, an indoor air assessment, for example? Oh, and then the other quick thing I just remembered, we did check, and EPA headquarters actually gave us the okay for tribes to purchase indoor air sensors through GAP, and they correlated them like around wildfire time. But if you're going to use them, they did mention that you need a QAP. So talk to your project officer to see if maybe you can do some little, you know, like some pre-planning, right? Because you don't know if you're going to be affected by a wildfire, but having that in place, ready to go, is probably a good idea. So talk to them to see if, you know, that makes sense.
It's on the QAP issue. It's also, I think, unnecessary to do something like that for when you're doing an investigation into homes, because a lot of the pollutants that we're looking into don't have standards for indoor air. So really, how can you have a QAP if there are no standardized testing protocols or testing methods or even testing strategies for that matter of fact? And so a lot of that is kind of like ambiguous.
Yeah, it's the wild, wild west. Pretty much, you're going to do your own thing. I mean, you're going to have to convince the QAQ guys at Region 9. But you're absolutely right. There's no published regulatory requirements. There's no published specific regulatory guidelines or methods. If you attend my courses. We give you lots of suggestions, and then it's really up to you, because there are no regulatory guidelines. So it's a two-edged sword, as in you don't have those guidelines already established, but you can do it your own way. As long as you get everybody else to agree with you. So,
Man, can I add to that? Just tag on.
Yes, please, Brad.
Yes. Okay, I just wanted to say that there will be the very first wildfire standard published in this industry. Probably the spring of next year. I am the chairman of the IICRC S760, which is the first wildfire standard, and we will cover much of this information on testing protocols and some thresholds that might be extremely useful for cleaning up after a wildfire. Again, we are at the final stages of drafting this. It will go into public comment probably in the next couple of months. And then after the first round or second round of public comment, it will be published, and it will be the first published standard.
Just to clarify, since you're mentioning published standards. Yeah. Okay. Just to clarify, who's authoring those standards, and then who's adopting and approving them for usage?
Yeah, I think that's a Brett question.
Okay. Well, the IICRC, and excuse me for not remembering what the acronym stands for. It's the Institute of Inspection, Certification, and Restoration, something like that. But the IICRC is the leading restoration industry association. That is a standard writing body. It is an ANSI, American National Standard Institute standard writing body, and it hopefully will be adapted internationally, as many of their standards are. The IRCRC also writes the S520, which is the mold standard that is the standard of the industry, and also water damage standard and other types of standards.
Okay,
And
thank you.
it's drafted by a consensus body of experts, and it goes through all kinds of accreditation processes, including following the ANSI requirements and public review. So it holds a lot of weight.
I just want to make another quick comment on standards. If you want to like dive deep into indoor air quality, and not that deep actually, but it was the White House actually had a summit on indoor air quality just less than a month ago, I think. And it's online, so you can Google White House Indoor Air Quality Summit and it'll pop up and the recording is there. And all the speakers were talking about possibly establishing indoor air standards. So we were all, like all of us who work on indoor air quality, were like crossing our fingers and toes, like, oh, are we getting close? Are we getting close? And I don't know what exactly that would cover yet. I know there was an emphasis on COVID and viruses, but definitely particulate matter. I don't know if they're going to cover VOCs, but hopefully we're moving in that direction. So maybe we will have standards soon.
So meanwhile, don't wait. Meanwhile, don't wait. It'll probably be years before we have, if we ever have anything regulatory or guidelines. So I'm happy to work with you, but you know, you're gonna make things up. And all you gotta do is convince everybody to agree with you. And I'm a good convincer.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. If you have other questions, feel free to reach out to any of us, but otherwise we'll give a round of applause to our presenters.
And for all attendees, there is the slides uploaded into the chat box. These are all recorded sessions, so you should be able to access them later for any contact info.